Live from the New Scientist Labs, it's Janine Young with Wammo on Kiwi.
New Scientist correspondent joining us from the New Scientist Labs in Melbourne City today, Janine Young. Good morning, Janine.
Good morning, Wammo.
Very shortly we're going to talk about boozing students and ways to measure your booze intake. Particularly at the moment, it's very much in the news, especially with rioting students in Dunedin here in New Zealand on the booze. But the first story, though, is all about bees, Janine.
I think you and I have worked out in our discussions before today that we both like bees.
Yeah, for some reason, bees, I just find bees really fascinating. I think it's the whole social makeup and network of bees.
Bees are quite extraordinary. When you think about it, they have a brain no bigger than a pinhead, which is pretty damn small, but they have very complex societies, and the story has always gone that they do a little dance. No, I'm not about to break into KC and the Sunshine Band, but they do a little dance to be able to tell their hive mates, the other workers, where there's food. Or at least that's what we've been told for the last God knows how many years. A guy called Carl von Frisch in 1946 discovered the waggle dance. The
little waggle, what? What do they do?
They shake their booty. A bee that's coming back from a good food source comes back to the hive.
Yeah.
The honeycombs are vertical, as everybody knows. It runs a figure of 8, and on the straight part of this, the bee buzzes its wings and vibrates its abdomen. So that's the waggle. That's the bit that actually gives crucial information about where this food is.
And so the rest of the lazy bees hanging out in the hive are like, oh, there he goes. No, we see that now. We know. Right. I suppose we've got to leave and do our job.
Well, this is where it starts to get interesting, actually, because although this does convey distance and direction to where this food is, people are now thinking that it's actually not quite as important as perhaps it originally was. And it could be that this dance is, as you say, part of that motivating other bees to go and look for food. Now, this isn't to say necessarily that they're fundamentally lazy, but there's always a good proportion of bees in the hive, and you've got to look after the little pupae and all that sort of stuff, the baby bees and all that kind of thing, and they've got to clean up. And obviously there's different jobs that bees have to do, but going and getting food is a really important one. And they're thinking now that the experiments they're doing are actually looking at slightly more normal conditions, so that they're introducing odour, smells into the situation instead of just the waggle dance. They're finding that the dance is probably actually more of a backup information as opposed to, being the crucial primary let's go get food.
So do you think they come back smelling of good food?
Well, that can also be part of it as well. It's very likely that there's different positions that people can actually be in, or bees can actually be in when this waggle dance is happening. They can get different kinds of information. Some may smell or taste the nectar because, as you said, they're covered in the stuff. Others may be able to see the exact angle of the dance, and that's the angle against the sun, so they know how far off the vertical they have to travel. Others can actually be close enough to translate the length because the distance forward they travel is the distance towards the food. So it could be that different bees are picking up different signals out of this dance, and they're actually finding that it's probably one component of a more complex system that also involves general motivation and smelling it and generally getting them excited.
Because isn't it must be awfully, it's obviously it's very natural, but a complicated natural process to actually decide the direction that the actual food is, and where. It's over something, it's under something, it's round, it's quite extraordinary.
Well, that's a really important complexity that I suspect hasn't been taken into account, because they have looked at it and gone, okay, we've got distance and we've got direction. But as you say, what if it's not out in the open? What if it's not the only food source? What if it's actually the blue flower instead of the red one?
Yeah.
There has to be more signals, surely, because these are complex societies, and they seem capable of deciphering relatively complex information. So it would appear that, experiments that have been used with just one artificial feeder out in the field a little bit simplistic.
Are ants actually mentioned at all in this article? Because there's a lot of similarities between bees and ants in the way they find food.
It's not. Ants tend to communicate through chemical signals. So if you actually watch a trail of ants when they're going back and forth from a food source to it's not a hive, is it? What do they call it?
What is it?
A nest.
Ant nest? Yeah, I suppose it is, yeah.
I like watching ants. I'm fascinated by them.
Yeah.
You'll see that they stop every little while, and they kind of touch noses. Their tentacles rub together. They're communicating by pheromones.
Right.
That communicates the type of food, how far away it is, how many ants are involved. Again, very complex signalling. It's happening in a way that I'm not sure we completely understand.
No, because good luck humans being able to do it, eh? Imagine a human coming back. Oh, I suppose you can communicate via voice. Okay, it's around over that beyond that rock, and you turn right. But it's easy to get lost.
Well, we talked about being lost a few weeks ago, didn't we?
Yeah.
The concept of being able to find something when you're just being given directions isn't that simple, because you can miss a crucial step.
Yeah.
I know that I've stopped and given directions to people on the street quite a bit in the last fortnight. I seem to have become the tour guide for Melbourne.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, so it's down that street, turn right. Yeah, but, there's a landmark here and that might help you. I'm trying to give people extra clues because it's so easy to forget the left, right, up, down, cross the tram tracks, that kind of thing.
You just rub your hands together and give them some pheromones, Janine. That'll tell them where it is.
That simple.
Hey, let's talk about boozing students and a study, or I guess it's a study in Australia with students getting online to a website.
Yeah, the University of Newcastle, which is one of the towns in New South Wales, has been looking at a whole bunch of students, and I think most of us went to university. We know what happened. We know what it was like.
Yeah.
Abstinence wasn't really the key. It wasn't really what you were aiming for when you were down at the bar on frankly, a Tuesday night when I think about it.
Yeah.
What they did with these students was the website called Thrive starts with a 10-minute consultation which looks at their drinking habits, and eventually it works out how much more the heaviest drinkers are consuming compared with their peers.
Right.
The extent to which they're exceeding the recommended limits, because I think it's 2 standard drinks a day for women and 3 for men. I don't know the standards exactly, but it's not much. And also the health effects of the blood alcohol on their worst binges. But perhaps most importantly, it tells them how much they're spending in a year. Because, for students it all comes down to money, frankly.
Yeah.
So they're actually finding that of the 7,000 undergrads that they used in this study, 2,400 were identified as having a problem, and that's quite a substantial number.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty scary, actually. But it seems to have done a little bit of good, because at least 6 months after the study, the heaviest drinkers had reduced their intake by 11%. Doesn't sound like much, but it is an improvement.
So it's kind of a budgeting site for boozers.
Yes, I suppose you can look at it slightly cynically and say, well, okay, if I just reduce by this, then I can get away with not killing my liver and still be drunk.
But this sounds like a really good idea, though, because people don't really change their behaviours until they see exactly how it's affecting them.
And that is all part of the deal, whether it's smoking or whether it's drinking or whether it's eating fatty food.
Yeah.
A lot of people need to actually have it brought home to them. As you say, very specifically, it is killing your liver or,
Or your liver function is reduced by this much.
And that means that you will have, cirrhosis in 15 years or whatever, that kind of thing. When you're in university, it seems like a long way away and you feel like you're invincible and you don't think, hell, we've all been there, you don't think anything is going to happen to you.
Hell, I still feel invincible, Janine.
Well, don't we all? Invincibility is a very positive thing when it's channeled properly. So, and that's part of the joy of being that young and being in university, and your entire life is ahead of you.
Yeah.
So bringing home the sorts of damage that drinking can do is a really positive thing. If they're even cutting down by 10%, that's got to be a good thing.
All right. Well, all those details you find in New Scientist magazine coming out next week, and the bee story as well, Janine.
We love the bees. We'll keep going with bees as long as we possibly can.
We will, and we'll talk to you next week. See ya.
Okay. Catch you later.